I love classic Resident Evil, don't you? As good as the remakes, not you, Resident Evil 3, are, there's something about the classic formula that just hits different. The fixed cameras, the music, the cheesy dialogue, and the characters that felt fresh and unique before they turned into whatever this is. But then there's Resident Evil 0, a game that just completely misses the point of being Resident Evil, of being a video game that's fun to play. So let's dive into this oddity of the Capcom catalog and see how things went so far off the rails in a game that had everything going for it. They start going awry almost immediately when we see a train in the Arclay Mountains being attacked by hungry, mutated leeches, seemingly being controlled by a Final Fantasy villain? No, really, he's clearly in the wrong game. And that's really the first red flag. Resident Evil is a series that never shied away from theatrical villains, though it's something Capcom seems interested in play away from in the remakes. That our mystery man here is literally theatrical. But there's no time to dwell on that, as the STAR's B-team is on their way to check out some mysterious murders when their helicopter just explodes because the plot demands it. They land in an open patch of the mountain forest, conveniently next to a crashed military jeep, laden with evidence about an escaped convict called Billy Cohen, who's on death row for killing a whole bunch of people. From here, the coincidences fall like rain about Rebecca's ears as she stumbles upon a mystery train. Right off the bat, you're struck by how goddamn gorgeous this game looks. This game ran on a GameCube, which your phone could pound into the ground in terms of graphical firepower today. And regardless of whatever I'm about to say about this game, let it be known that I adore how Capcom's artists were able to take advantage of the limitations that they were given and turn out a game that looks gorgeous even today. But there's zombies about and they're hankering for a Rebecca sandwich. Hunt and rail the train love enough, and you'll quickly begin to fill your inventory with items, only to realize that there's no storage boxes. Yeah, kids, let's rip that band-aid off and talk about your inventory. Resident Evil 0 took the bold step of doing away with the wormhole-connected item boxes of its predecessors. But unlike later games which did the same, but storage was plentiful and capable of being expanded, Resident Evil 0 just gives you 6 slots, and that's because the world is now your item box. Or more specifically, the floor is. Yep, you can drop your stuff anywhere now. And it's honestly annoying. Don't get me wrong, dropping items to pick them up later is actually a welcome feature in a Resident Evil game, since earlier titles often had you running a marathon back to the item box just to free up your inventory. But having no central repository usually just results in you picking a room as your designated dumping ground and treating it like it's an item box anyway, because the alternative is to just drop items anywhere. And with such limited slots, there's no way to avoid reorganizing your inventory, which, if you're a neat freak like me, just makes you feel dirty inside. So the attempt to reshape the gameplay of the series just leads to the player recreating it, but now with extra steps. Thanks, I hate it. When around Blah Field bumps into Mr. Cohen himself, who is just the most beautiful monument to Y2K that anyone could ask for, harnessing the power of hair wax and tribal tattoos. Look, there was a time everyone thought they were cool, I swear, just Austin Kazama. Simultaneously to try and charm the pants of Rebecca in the middle of a zombie outbreak. I guess when you've been on death row as long as Billy has, it's been a long time since you've felt the touch of a woman. Anyway, here's where my Steam copy of the game decided to let it be known that it was not afraid to crash to desktop without a moment's notice. So instead we're switching to my copy of RE0 on the Xbox 360. Hope you like 720p 30 FPS, because that's what you're getting from here on out. We run into a guy who's just made of leeches, and before things get a chance to get looter than I'd like, Billy shows up to remind everyone of how edgy and cool he is by shooting all the leeches off Rebecca in slow motion. It was the 2000s and the Matrix was a thing. What else can I say? After that, Rebecca decides it's time to defy all common sense, the most basic understanding of how electricity works, by jamming two exposed wires together to fix a door. Live wires on a metal roof in a rainstorm, wearing fingerless gloves. Honestly, the fact that you don't game over on the spot from this act alone might just be the most offensive part of this whole game. It just gets worse the more you think about it. But we don't have time for that because we're on to the game's first boss, a giant scorpion. While this enemy is visually impressive, don't get me wrong, the problem here is that it's just boring. Thematically, I mean. All the bosses in this game are just bigger versions of regular animals or insects. It just feels like a missed opportunity to me. The T-Virus can mutate a creature in ghastly and horrific ways, and your answers just take a regular bug and make it bigger. thank God Resident Evil Requiem learned from past mistakes and, you should probably ignore that. Anyway, you shoot him in the head by aiming downward until he dies. That's basically it. With that bug ticket to Pound Town, we get access to a little more of the train, along with the grapple gun, an object that takes up 2 inventory slots and won't be used again for several hours, meaning that you need to lug around with you for an awkward amount of time solely for the purpose of reminding you how terrible the inventory system is in this game. That gets you access to a different area of the train, a few doodads, and a cutscene where you get to enjoy the comedy stylings of Albert Wesker and William Birkin. One of the weird things RE0 does is retcon the story of Resident Evil so that William and Albert were buddies in the Umbrella train facility in their halcyon days of learning how to be evil bastards. The story doesn't really do anything with this development. They just pop up from time to time to twirl their collective mustache and remind everyone that they're assholes. And it's that commitment to dickery that makes them knock out the train's brakes, threatening to kill everyone on board. And we're stuck with a timer to get them back online before Keanu Reeves starts feeling litigious. Run your butt to the back of the train and discover that reactivating the brakes is tied to a number puzzle for babies, completing 2 of which causes the train to slide to a gentle halt, saving everyone on board. No, wait, okay, the train crashes anyway. Glad we got to do that. Make your way out of the wreckage and we're treated to the metal-based shot of our heroes stumbling blindly into the Umbrella Research Center, the foyer of which looks exactly like the Spencer Mansion, because at this point, Capcom will incur the wrath of an elvish horror if that contract is not fulfilled. Anyway, hope you like this place because it's where we're spending the lion's share of the game from this point forward. It's also where the other really big problem of the game rears its ugly head. Balance. Capcom were one of the pioneers of the survival horror genre. Core concept being that you were given a limited amount of health and ammo to work with, which is a puzzle that exists to reward the player. Manage it poorly and you're effectively softlocked, being forced to restart due to a lack of resources. But manage it well, and you're rewarded with an abundance of health and ammo when you need it the most, making difficult encounters easier if you've shown good skill and judgment. Resident Evil 0 just doesn't have that. Even on normal difficulty, you'll find yourself in feast or famine mode at different points in the game. Early on, like we are now, ammo is strangely absent, forcing you to burn through health items unnecessarily as you try to avoid spinning bullets to get by enemies. This is made even more punishing by the fact that enemies just respawn in several spots in the mansion for no particular reason. This isn't like the Crimson Heads of the RE1 remake. Here the game just decides that the room you cleared of zombies an hour ago needs to be repopulated because screw you, I guess. You might say it's just the game's way of being challenging, but the reverse becomes true later in the game. In later stages, I had more bullets than I knew what to do with, at times having over 100 rounds for the handgun. Roaming the mansion, you'll find yourself hitting all the familiar Resident Evil beats. Clearing rooms, item hunting, finding keys. We're playing all of the classics here. You'll occasionally run to a wibbly-wobbly Sugman, who's the token nemesis of the game, stepping in for Mr. X, the unkillable enemy who's always stalking you. He has a pretty severe weakness to fire. Who knew living things don't like being set on fire? So it's handy to keep a few mollies on your person for whenever he shows up. Keep pushing ahead and we're onto the game's next boss. I have the same complaints about almost every boss in the game, in that they're just kind of boring. But I do have a unique gripe about this one in particular. Rebecca gets put in timeout for this fight, meaning it's up to Billy to take this thing to Pound Town, which wouldn't be a problem except that while Rebecca is out of action, you don't have access to her inventory. Which means that if you trigger this fight while she happens to be carrying any of your heals, shotgun, or grenade launcher, congratulations, you're softlocked. Your fault's on having a crystal bowl, I guess. Thump that bug into the dirt, we're back to exploring the training facility, moving giant chess pieces and taking Rebecca on a tour of the sex dungeon. Look, I've got one in my academy, don't judge it till you try it. Sadly, it's far less exciting than my version, since this one just has you solving a generated puzzle before triggering a cutscene with more of Wesker and Albert, arguing with Genesis Rhapsodos before releasing a whole bunch of Eliminators into the facility. Anyone who's ever played Resident Evil 0 will tell you that Eliminators are the absolute worst. They're like someone bred lickers with hunters before feeding them a staple diet of amphetamines and hatred. Killing them isn't the hard part. The shotgun is more than enough to make them regret the rest of their life. No, it's the fact they can absolutely stun-lock you with a quarter if you give them half a chance. And given their high mobility and ability to jump across the room like you owe them money, you'll be cursing their name while trying to extract your control from the wall before you know it. From there, it's back to the puzzle grind, including this just terribly designed pile of crap, where you need to ignore what's written on the plots and instead activate the statues in the order of their place in the food chain. Anyone in the comments telling me that doesn't imply the line as top dog is getting deleted. And Billy proving that he's a man of culture by rocking out on piano in the place of Jill. But there's no time for that level of riz because we're on to the next boss, which is a giant bat. Because if this game hasn't shown you that it's bereft of good ideas by this point, then this is gonna really ram it home. To add insult to injury, the only ammunition you get before the fight is for the grenade launcher, which it turns out is almost impossible to hit him with. So hope you're stocked up on shotgun shells because otherwise you're back to Suffolk City without a cab fare. And if you think the game is trolling you with that little gem, here know what trolling is because I hope you're carrying that Gretel gun with you that you haven't touched for several hours. Because if not, you're doing the walk of shame back to wherever it is that you dropped it. Yep, there is a hole in the roof in these grappling, so start walking, bitch. From here, we're hitting the labs, dodging wibbles, sending crap back and forth between partners, and mixing chemicals to solve some pretty standard Resident Evil puzzles. There's nothing wrong with it, and we hit that part of the game where ammo has stopped being a problem. This is where RE0 starts to feel like a proper Resident Evil game, and you might finally be in danger of actually enjoying yourself for once. Break into a cable car, and from there you'll get a nice dose of member berries before hitting a few familiar scenes from Resident Evil 2. Then you step back to reality just in time for a throwdown with the proto-tyrant, a spare tyrant that Wesker and William just had lying around. Weirdly never mentioned again when Wesker was gooning over the actual tyrant in Resident Evil 1. Hope Billy wasn't carrying anything important because he's out of action for this section and we haven't learned that lesson from the Centurion fight, apparently. But get reunited with that sexy convict and you'll be in for the most awkward section of the game, the water treatment plant. A confusing section you'll be running around a lot doing box puzzles. Can you even court Resident Evil without one of those? Getting forklift certified and fighting the prototype again because who the hell cares at this point?
Oh, sweet Clayton.
Actually, no, I take that back. Fuck these stupid frogs. These asshole amphibians only have one attack, and guess what? It's an instant kill.
Frogs, friggin' frogs, man! It's not funny!
I died to these pricks more than any other enemy in the game. And you might be saying to yourself, but Red, you die because you didn't have your partner with you. Well, guess again. Because I had Billy with me and he was more than happy to watch the whole thing unfold without firing a single shot.
Did I leave the stove on?
Make your way through the front fortress and you'll be true to the game's big reveal. Our mystery antagonist is actually James Marcus, the man killed by Umbrella only for William and Wesker to take over his research, in scenes that copy the death of William from Resident Evil 2 almost beat for beat. Except, it's also not actually James. It just looks like James. In reality, it's the Queen Leech? After he was done in, when he absorbed his DNA and memories. Apparently, taking a decade to gestate before learning how to shapeshift and sing opera for purely dramatic reasons. Honestly, it really doesn't matter at this point because nothing about the game's story makes sense, and it's too late to start caring now. Torch your butt with a bunch of flame grenades before we take an elevator ride to the surface. Just in time for round 2 with the Queen, who's back and begging for another serve at the cookout. Barbecue her butt enough and you'll discover her other crippling weakness besides getting shot to pieces. Sunlight. Now the fight turns into a race to keep yourself alive and her distracted while Rebecca runs all over the creation, racing clamps that open up the roof to give her the suntan of a lifetime. What's funny about this is that the boss fight was copied almost beat for beat in Resident Evil 9, right down to the weakness to light the girl boss shares with our leechy mistress here. So make of that what you will. We'll give her stars just before a dramatic explosion, completing our checklist of things that allow us to legally call this a Resident Evil game. Rebecca lets Billy go, because why shouldn't she take the word of a convicted serial killer when he looks at her with those big blue eyes and says, "Wasn't me."
Bruh.
We get a brief little glimpse of the Spencer estate, just in time to hint at the horrors to come in Resident Evil 1 before we roll credits. And that's it. Game over. And honestly, this game sucks. I know there's gonna be people in the comments telling me that it's great, that it was their first Resident Evil and it holds a special place in their hearts. And you know what? Great. I'm glad you enjoy it. More power to you. Just because I don't like something doesn't mean that you shouldn't. A reasonable opinion on the internet? I know, I'll stop. But for me, this was my 3rd time beating the game, and somehow it gets worse every time I play it. And I want to like it. I grew up on this stuff, but there's something about Zero that just feels so sauceless. joyless, bereft of any good ideas of its own. It just stumbles out from one area to the next, tossing in all these familiar elements, knowing that you should like them, but not really understanding what makes them work in the first place. If you've never played RE0, oddly enough, I think you should still give it a go. Because if nothing else, it's a piece of Resident Evil history that was put together with care and good intentions. Even if those efforts don't work as they were planned, draw your own conclusions. I hope you get more out of it than I did.